We've heard a lot in the last couple of months about the Tea Party movement and various activities, protests of one kind or another, both from kind of a constitutional perspective and from perhaps Tocqueville's perspective. Should we encourage the Tea Party people? Should we ignore them? Or should we condemn them?
I think as long as they're not violent, I see no reason why we should condemn them. Though I would like to point out that there's a survey done by CBS, and 30% of them didn't know that, or felt that President Obama was born in another country. Our Constitution says that in Article 2, Clause 1, Section 5, that no president can be president unless he's born in the United States. So obviously that's not the case. So it's difficult to judge just how legitimate they really are.
I think Tocqueville would definitely approve of the Tea Party movement simply because they're becoming engaged in their society. We as a group have created two vocabulary terms, one being active engagement and one being passive engagement. And to delineate between the two, we're going to use them kind of throughout this presentation. Active engagement we have defined as actually being out in your community, being involved in your community, physically making changes by communicating with other people. While passive engagement tends to encompass more of individualistic engagement, such as just finding out information with the massive amount of technological access we have today. An example of this would be texting into Haiti, where you're sitting by yourself texting money, but you were still being engaged.
This also is a good thing in that the Tea Parties are kind of following the example that Martin Luther King Jr. set in the Civil Rights Movement, where he used civil disobedience to point out what laws he thought were unjust.
I believe the Tea Parties are very key with active engagement. It's a bunch of people coming together, talking together, and using their right to assemble and sort of petition to try and make changes in our government.
You spoke about a right to education. Is there such a right? Or is that something that government bestows as a benefit?
Plyler v. Joe established that illegal immigrants have the right. So if we're going to allow illegal immigrant children have the right to education, so if we're going to allow illegal immigrants to have that, then obviously it's a right because we're not going to give rights to people that aren't citizens.
However, even though I recognize that point, I would say that education is more of an opportunity. We have the chance to receive a good education, as we see with the 30% high school dropout rate in this country.
When Eleanor Roosevelt drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they inserted in Article 26 that education should be a fundamental right that we should have.
Social philosopher John Dewey once said that democracy is reborn in every generation and education is its midwife. Education is the most important thing we have to making our country keep going.
I think it was mentioned maybe that there is an equal opportunity, but you look at the statistics today and there's a huge gap in wealth distribution. There's a few people at the top, there's a lot of people at the bottom, and there's not very many people in the middle anymore. I'd just like to hear you comment as to why you think that is, and if that is the case, and then to compare it, what Tocqueville said about having a greater opportunity here than amongst other places.
Well, Tocqueville not only recognized the great opportunity, but he also recognized the how capitalist our country is. And that's why you see the great gap, because we don't have a socialist type of economy. We have a capitalist where it's kind of like survival of the fittest.
You can also relate it to how we relate to people around us. We're not as engaged in our community's happenings, and I mean, if you have issues at home, you're probably more likely to not attend school, or if you don't have those values instilled. Education is a huge portion of where you can go in life.
In other parts of his writing, Tocqueville talked about us being a nation of joiners, and we look at some of the statistics in particularly voluntary kind of groups. We're pretty involved in that way. On the other hand, we hear a lot of people condemning the lobbyists who often sit at the table that you're sitting at this morning as being a cancer on our society. What would Tocqueville think about the number, the 80,000 lobbyists who work in this town?
He would probably love it. I mean, he's seeing people stand up for what they believe in and going against their government in a way that is acceptable and allowing them to get the rights that they feel they need.
Let's go back to the citations that you made, you spoke about the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendments as being important to citizen involvement. Elaborate a little bit on that. Why and how?
Well, the 14th, 15th, and the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, which allowed them to be more participating in government. The 15th Amendment gave African Americans the right to vote, which allowed them to vote for their ideals and essentially help with the civil rights movement. And the 14th Amendment defined a citizen, which also included a large number of people who weren't citizens and couldn't vote before that.
These three amendments make our country more democratic because they're creating a larger sphere of people that are allowed to have their voice in government.
And the 14th Amendment establishes equality and allows people to have equality, not specifically citizens. So it's expanding the number of people that have rights in America.
If that's the case for voting, for instance, then how can you explain that so many people just don't vote and are not engaged?
I believe it all starts at education. It's the same fundamental issue over and over again. If we are not taught as young kids that voting is an important thing, we're not going to want to go out and vote. I don't know how many 18-year-olds are like excited because of their 18th birthday because they're going, oh, I can go vote for president now. It's, oh, I can go buy cigarettes or something along those lines. So I think it's a societal thing. And as adults, we need adults to help us change that. And as this upcoming generation, we need to make sure that this is changed for our kids too.